Julie, are you ready for me to bring you in? She's coming in regardless. Julie, how goes the battle?
Ongoing, always changing.
Okay, so we don't have very much time, so I'm going to make the absolute most of this. The 30,000 foot overview for those who haven't seen our previous interviews. Who are you? What are you doing? And we're going to get into what you're working on right now. Uh-oh, you seem to have been
Yes, who am
frozen.
I? Good question. So I'm frozen.
Yeah, well, it's fine. You're back now. Okay.
Okay. um, so I am a writer and reporter. I've been following the events of January 6th, really since the day of. I wrote a book on it called January 6th. You can find it on Amazon or wherever. Right now I'm on Substack, Declassified with Julie Kelly. And my primary focus is what's happening to the now then more than 1,200 Americans who continue to be investigated, arrested, and charged for the events of January 6th, but also Special Counsel Jack Smith's 2 criminal indictments against Donald Trump, one in Southern Florida on classified documents, and one in the District of Columbia for the events of January 6th and his alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 election.
Okay, you'll send me all of these links afterwards so I can put them in the pinned comment because I haven't done it yet. So I feel bad. Okay, we'll go with the shortest one, I think, for now. Yetman. You've been in touch with Yetman. This is the individual who was charged, or his arrest warrant was issued damn near, what are we, almost 3 years out or 2.5 years out of January 6th. Massive SWAT, like it was like Osama bin Laden had been unleashed on the streets of America and they were going door to door. Tell us what happened there, what the situation is, and how Yetman is doing now.
So this is Gregory Yetman, a combat veteran with tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan. He also was a guard at Guantanamo Bay. He has been investigated, targeted by this Department of Justice now, as you said, for almost 3 years related to his minor involvement in January 6th. He cooperated with the FBI. He met with them twice. According to his brother, who I spoke with last Friday after Gregory Yetman turned himself in, he thought he was sort of in the clear. Their home had been surveilled by the FBI for 3 months. And last Wednesday, as Gregory Yetman, 47 years old, walked outside of his house at 7 a.m. to go to work, like most decent Americans do, he was surrounded by dozens of armed FBI agents, SWAT vehicles, military-style vehicles, the Joint Terrorism Task Force of the FBI attempting to arrest him, later accusing him of spraying police officers on January 6th for about 12 seconds with some sort of canister of spray. When he was surrounded by the FBI and other law enforcement agencies, he fled into the woods behind his home, where he stayed for 2 nights before turning himself in. Even in the process, this turned into an expansive manhunt. It was covered by ABC News, Nightly News. They deployed drones. They deployed helicopters, police dogs, trying to hunt down a man who has done nothing more than serve his country his entire adult life, has no criminal record, but he is considered a domestic terrorist because he had the gall to go to Washington, D.C. on January 6th in support of Donald Trump and to protest the 2020 election. This, though, for those of you who are just seeing this for the first time, and of course, you know, Viva, I put this on my Twitter. For the first time, people have seen this sort of FBI raid. This has been going on since mid-January of 2021. These sort of raids are not unusual, especially for suspects who are accused of assaulting police officers. But the point this is still happening almost 3 years later, I'm getting notifications now every day of new arrests being made by the Department of Justice and Matthew Graves, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. He can't keep his own city safe. You know, Biden's granddaughter almost gets carjacked in Washington, D.C., but Matthew Graves and DOJ is still rounding up people from outside of D.C. who were involved even minimally in January 6th.
It makes absolutely no sense. The warrant at worst alleges AFO assault on a federal officer. In the report from ABC, I noticed where they said that they referred to Yetman's interviews, prior interviews. They did mean interviews with authorities, correct? It's not as though he had he had sat down and answered questions in interviews. If they wanted to arrest him, they could have done it at any point prior in the last 2 years.
They absolutely could have. I mean, he would have turned himself in. I believe his first interview was February of 2021. He ended up on the FBI's one of their posters. So he was well aware at that point that the FBI was tracking down people who were involved in January 6th. So now they've accused him of, as you said, assaulting a DC Metro police officer. That's not a federal police officer. It's not Capitol Police. It's not Secret Service or Park Police. This is Metropolitan Police Department. And I'll tell you, I'm working with my team right now on surveillance video that we have from security cameras that will show exactly what was happening at this spot that they claim that Greg Yetman assaulted police officers, what happened, and what it more looks like he was trying to do than directly spray police officers, who, by the way, were clad head to toe in riot gear and had been assaulting people outside of the building on Capitol grounds for over an hour and a half by the time Greg Yetman took any alleged action. So I'm working on that reporting as well. But look, this is an ongoing travesty. This is a mini Gestapo, this FBI. And you know what? Shame on House Republicans who have had the chance to do something to stop this and defend these individuals and refuse to do so. They're only emboldening the Department of Justice and the FBI.
I would even be prepared to let's operate on the assumption that he allegedly assaulted an officer. That's not something they just discovered now. They've had the January 6th committees, the 8-part miniseries. They could have, should have, and if they wanted to, arrested him any time long ago, peacefully, without having to terrorize a neighborhood. And yet they do it this way, go door to door, tell people to shelter in place.
That's right.
Preposterous. So, and have you heard from him directly or indirectly as to how he's doing now? Where is he now?
I have not. And, and let's go a step further, what you're saying. Even if he did spray these police officers, is this how we use federal law enforcement resources for any individual who sprays a police officer? Think of what the FBI could be doing related to the riots of 2020. Even in Washington, D.C., they would still be doing armed FBI raids with SWAT vehicles on people who assaulted police officers. This is not what America does. This is not what the FBI and Joint Terrorism Task Force is for. Well, to surveil, investigate, and use arm. Think of the danger that this posed to this small community in central New Jersey. This town doesn't even have a stoplight. 7 a.m. You have children walking to the bus. You have mothers taking their children to school. It's 7 a.m. People are on their way to work, on their way to school, on their way to with their lives. And here are armed FBI agents in this neighborhood. They're lucky no one was killed. Innocent bystanders killed. So these are the risks they're willing to take for the optics, for the news coverage, and to juice the numbers about alleged domestic violent extremists, terrorists, i.e. Trump supporters.
Well, they say, is this what they do? This is what they do. They did it with the pro-life activist FBI pre-dawn raid. They did it with the 72-year-old visually impaired guy that they basically executed. And now, I mean, everybody who has not seen Police State, I mean, you were one of the documentarians in the documentary. This is a police state. I mean, it's there's no other word for it. Okay, so is Yetman? He's been released, correct? He's still detained.
He is still detained. He turned himself in last Friday. He was arraigned in D.C. court, and DOJ asked to keep him in custody in pretrial detention. He was remanded back into custody, where he will now languish probably at the D.C. Gulag, which I've been reporting on, for months awaiting trial. So he has not been released, and he will not be released by this Department of Justice or the judges in D.C.
It's a godforsaken outrage, period, full stop. Mm-hmm. What any other developments in any of the other January 6 cases, January 6 defendants that you want to bring to people's attention?
So, as I said, the arrests are ongoing. I believe the Department of Justice has arrested another 6 individuals this week. This is in addition to 6 individuals, including Mr. Yetman last week. They are accelerating the pace of arrest in advance of Donald Trump's March 4th, 2024 trial in Washington related to the events of January 6th. It is imperative that the DOJ and the media keeps this front and center, and they do so by local news coverage. Hey, your neighbor down the street in, whatever, Colorado, there were 2 men arrested from Colorado just today. This is their way of keeping this in the forefront of the American consciousness, because then by the time you get to Trump's trial, they want to keep this relevant. They want to make it seem like this is at the forefront of people's mind when it's not, except if you live in Washington. And as I said, juice the number. So Jack Smith can go before a DC jury and say, we have 2,000 Americans who have been investigated, arrested, and charged for January 6th. They went to the Capitol that day to overthrow democracy because Donald Trump told them to do that. That's what this is all about. They don't care whose lives they destroy, what innocent people they endanger. This is how ruthless, reckless, and abusive this DOJ is.
You immediately make me feel stupid for not having put that together, the 2 and 2, in terms of the
That's
upcoming.
what I'm here for.
It's mind blowing. I mean, for those who don't know, there have been now at least 4 January 6th defendants who have taken their own lives as a result of this persecution.
That's right. At least 4 that we know of, including just this summer, I wrote about a boy who was 19 years old on January 6th, went to Washington with his uncle from their rural ranch in Utah. He's one of 10 children. His uncle was arrested and charged over the summer. DOJ then arrested and charged this boy who was now 22 years old. And the day he was scheduled to be arraigned in Washington, D.C., he shot himself in the head. His father found him. He was still alive, but tragically passed away. More blood on the hands of this DOJ. And guess what? They don't even care enough to make a statement about it. So we have at least 4 suicides, possibly up to 6, others who died prematurely because of what they were going through by this DOJ, federal judges, and what the media does to them as well.
Okay, it's outrageous. It's outrageous. And now, I mean, it sort of segues into the DC Jack Smith versus Trump case. So optically, very interesting. Re-traumatize the DC jury pool, or at least poison the DC jury pool. Make it look like they're terrorists that require door-to-door shelter-in-place warnings. As Trump comes to his, when is it supposed to start? On March 3rd, the DC case?
March 4th.
March 4th, the Monday before Super Tuesday.
That's right.
What are the latest developments in Jack Smith, Judge Chutkan's persecution of Trump?
So there's a lot happening because you've got not only the January 6th case in Washington, you have the classified documents case happening in Southern Florida. There you have a judge, Judge Aileen Cannon. I've written extensively about her. She, unlike all of the DC judges, including Tanya Chutkan, she has no tolerance for the games that are being played by this DOJ and special counsel Jack Smith. I was actually in her courtroom a few weeks ago and watched how she really upbraided DOJ and Jack Smith's team for the games that they are playing, not the least of which is trying to schedule 2 unprecedented history-making trials within 2.5 months of each other. So she called out DOJ for that. Anyway, yes, March 4th, that trial is supposed to start. Of course, Tanya Chutkan issued this broad gag order that is now temporarily on hold as the appeal goes forward in the DC Circuit Court. But Viva, to your point, think about the jury pool in Washington, D.C., a city that voted 92% for Joe Biden, a city that still conveys its trauma over the 4-hour disturbance at Capitol Hill. Almost anyone who has been brought before the judge, the government, and the defense has some sort of tie to the federal government or Congress. You have lawyers who worked for the Department of Justice who have been seated on jury panels. You have people with political ties to Democrats who have been seated on jury panels. How in the world is anyone going to seat a fair jury in Washington, D.C.? Jack Smith doesn't care. Tanya Chutkan doesn't care. Donald Trump's team certainly does. And that's why if ever there was justification to move a trial, a change of venue motion for it to be approved, it would certainly be this case in advance of the March 4th start of this trial.
Now, the ones I always get confused between, you got the classified documents in Florida, which is still brought by Jack Smith in D.C., and D.C. is the insurrection, put it in quotes, is the incitement of, what, the formal charge? Is it insurrection as a formal charge?
It is not. No, he has 3 conspiracy charges: conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct, conspiracy to deny people their rights, color of law, blah, 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 really bogus charges. And then obstruction of an official proceeding, this 1512C2 post-Enron felony I've written about extensively. More than 300 January 6th defendants have been charged with that felony. Now, what's interesting This is another competing thing that Jack Smith might have to deal with. Is there are two petitions before the Supreme Court asking them to overturn very slim majority who upheld that 1512C2 in January 6 cases. If the Supreme Court takes this up, which they should, because this is a law that has to do with evidence tampering, not political protests that become unruly. If the Supreme Court takes this up, this will be a huge blow to Jack Smith, not even a decision on it, just the mere fact that the highest court is going to be reviewing that. So there are a lot of moving parts. I know that I'm kind of all over the place, but Jack Smith is not on solid legal ground in either Washington, D.C., certainly not in the classified documents case. That trial could be delayed from May 20th beyond, because as I said, Judge Cannon blasted DOJ for scheduling these trials so closely together. And she's already postponed some of the pretrial deadlines. And she will hold a hearing 3 days before the DC trial starts to ask DOJ how they plan to proceed in the Southern District of Florida with that trial right on the heels of whatever happens in Washington. It's crazy. It's not even that Trump has been charged twice on 2 indictments. It is all the other things, going around them.
And you're not only not all over the place, it's quite linear and quite sequential, actually, is that you have the January 6 persecutions, which continue and have heated up, and it makes sense as to why. You got the DC case coming up on March 4th. If it proceeds, Eileen Cannon saying, we're not going that fast in Florida. We don't like the fact that you were indictment shopping in DC to bring it over to Florida in the first place, whether or not that's legit. Right. The question is this. There is some discussion as to whether or not the case in DC gets postponed because it's simply not plausible at this point in time to have it start on March 4th. What's the status on that?
I mean, I still don't see any way that it could happen on March 4th. Jury selection, a jury questionnaire is supposed to start on January 9th. How is Judge Chutkan going to resolve the 3 pending defense motions asking her to dismiss this case based on selective prosecution, the unconstitutionality of the charges? She will deny those motions to dismiss, and those will go to the appellate court as well. Basically, every decision that she will make, because every decision has been in favor of Jack Smith, will head to the appellate court. So there's no way that all of these issues, and of course, Donald Trump will be coming forward with a change of venue motion probably in January. She will deny that as well. She's already hinted that she's going to deny it. That too will have to go to the DC circuit. The idea that all of these constitutional matters, unprecedented matters, can be quickly resolved and put Donald Trump, not just the former president, but the presumptive Republican presidential nominee, on a stand in a city that's almost 100% Democratic. I think that the person who does not want either one of these to go to trial the most is Special Counsel Jack Smith, because he realizes all the flaws in his DC case, and he is getting his feet held to the fire in Judge Cannon's courtroom. Also, to your point, she could end up dismissing those charges against Donald Trump in Southern Florida because the entire investigation was conducted in Washington, D.C., outside of the proper jurisdiction. Remember, those documents were allegedly held at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. They weren't held in Washington, D.C. The indictment starts on January 21st, 2021. Trump was out of Washington by then. So she has already suggested that Jack Smith has abused the grand jury process, going to a very favorable grand jury in Washington before a very favorable Chief Judge Beryl Howell, an Obama appointee, to get all of this crazy evidence. Then at the last minute switched to Southern Florida to get the indictment. So that case is at risk as well. So this is not, smooth sailing for Jack Smith. In fact, it could get really bumpy really soon.
Well, and it's not just that it was out of jurisdiction, it's that it's in the most political partisan jurisdiction ever, where he arguably may have broken some rules that could have never been broken anywhere else, or at least outside of DC, in order to get the evidence to proceed with that trial in the first place, which might be ill-gotten evidence. Now, I had a question on this, Howard. The question is going to be, from Jack Smith's perspective, he doesn't care if Florida proceeds. He wants DC to proceed at all costs. Where are they now? There's been a motion. There was a motion to postpone. I think the judge said, no, we're not postponing the trial date, but for discovery, there's been an extension. Where are they in discovery?
So where they are in discovery, and this was part of what Judge Cannon in Southern Florida, and she did delay some of these pretrial deadlines because there's such tight restrictions on how classified documents can be handled in a case like this. Now think about this. Jack Smith wants to keep from Donald Trump allegedly classified files that he produced during his own presidency. That in and of itself is another unprecedented wrinkle. And this is under the Classified Information Procedures Act called SIPA. They're very strict, it's staged in how a defendant caught with classified records can view the discovery against them. Typically, the government withholds that. You know why? Not because it's the former president who produced them. It is because it's a terrorist who took them, or a spy took them, or a double agent. They don't want those individuals to look at that material again and do anything with it. Not because it was created during the presidency of the defendant. This is the sort of absurd Twilight Zone legal and political ground we're on right now. And the only person who's willing to call it out is Judge Aileen Cannon in Florida, which is, as you know, why all of the former feds, the echo chamber, the media wants her to recuse, because she is not a rubber stamp. So yes, she did delay many of these deadlines related to SIPA. She said, I'm not going to delay the trial yet, but she has called for a hearing on March 1st, as I said, 3 days before the DC trial starts, because she wants to ask DOJ where they are in the process and how they plan to protect the rights of the defendant, which is a judge's duty and obligation, which they're not doing in Washington to anyone, and how Donald Trump and his two co-defendants and his lawyers are going to be able to prepare for trial when at least one of them is going to be on trial every single day in Washington, 1,500 miles away.
Patently absurd. And I know that you've got a 4:30 hit. What else are you working on? You're good. Okay. What else do you have? I would say we can move it over to Georgia for a second. Let's move.
Well, let's talk about Georgia, because this is another little wrinkle in Jack Smith's indictment, is the stunning order that came out over the weekend. I believe it was Friday, from Judge Totenberg in Georgia. This was a 135-page order, opinion and order about election fraud in Georgia. This case started in 2017. She now has ordered a bench trial to start on January 9th. Looking into the insecurities and the vulnerabilities of Georgia's electric voting system. This does not have to do with just 2020. It has to do with numerous elections. And more importantly, the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, who failed to secure those systems despite numerous warnings. She went into detail about what was wrong with these election systems. So that bench trial is going to start the same day that a jury questionnaire draft is slated to begin in the DC trial, and certain deadlines are looming in Southern Florida. But the big problem for Jack Smith is that Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State in Georgia, is a defendant in the lawsuit in Georgia. He is supposed to be a government witness for Jack Smith in Donald Trump's. I need a whiteboard, right? You know that whiteboard with the guy going all over?
Yeah, it's the meme. The guy's connecting all the dots.
That's right.
This is like a Tom Clancy novel that would be too confusing to follow.
You couldn't make it up.
And I can't hear Raffensperger's name without Barnes always pronounce it Ratfaceburger. So he's going to be a defendant in a case that calls into question the voting systems, the digital electronic voting systems.
Yes.
I had a thought there for a second. Oh, it pertained to the signature matches, which they never did in Georgia. I don't know how prominent or if that's an issue in this pending lawsuit. So that's going to go to trial. Raffensperger is going to be a defendant there to what might potentially uncover improprieties, where there's RICO charges for having denied the results and sought to overturn them.
Right.
In Georgia. Okay.
In Georgia, in the Fulton County, in Fannie Willis's case. So this also throws a wrench into her case, the RICO case against Donald Trump. But the bigger fish is Jack Smith and his federal indictment. And this is all related to attempts to overturn the election. He talks extensively about Donald Trump's involvement in Georgia and attempts to, find whatever 11,000 some odd votes, and cites, without naming him, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and also Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. So the twisted, what do they say? The twisted
The-
web we weave. Yes,
It's absolutely incredible.
it is.
And now, I look. I'm not putting Jenna Ellis on blast. Whether I think people might think I'm too forgiving on her. I still am forgiving for people who are being put through a ringer that they might not be able to deal with. But I don't know. ABC News, whoever released a portion of her interview with
Proffer.
who was it that she was being interviewed by? It was the
Her proffer. Her
or
proffer.
proffer. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
I
So
thought, I thought
proffer is basically where you meet and then you explain, before a plea deal, the details of your plea.
okay. I thought you said for Pravda, which would have made also sense. But
How
in her
about for
proffer.
profit? For
Well,
profit.
okay.
That would be
There's,
more like it.
I discussed that with another lawyer from California, Ian Corzine, who said, there could be claims for people who donated to her defense only
Yeah.
to see her cop a deal, and then there's $250,000 there. How could the lawyers have billed for $250,000? But even in the statement that's circulating, I'll play it when you're not here so that I don't waste valuable time. She's basically saying that, what's the guy's name? I keep losing his name.
Scavino.
Scavino told her that at a Christmas party in December, Trump told him, we're never going to concede. We're going to stay in power regardless. And she said, you can't do that. It's not lawful. And he said, too bad. And yet Trump was out after having exhausted what many people believe were legal remedies that never got fully heard by the courts. I don't even see what's so bad about it. Even
Right.
if we take for granted that it's true, it's
Right.
like third party hearsay from a third party. Trump told this guy who told her that he wasn't going to do something that never happened in the first place. So that's the best they got if they're leaking it or if they're disclosing that.
They are. And I mean, this is all to create ads and it's all to, bolster all of these cases. Jenna, the DC case, and of course, the Fulton County case, and anything related to election fraud. But to your point, so what if Dan Scavino said that? That's not against the law. Donald Trump left office. Everything was fine. And Jenna Ellis, by the way, if she thought that this was so untoward, why did she stay on the legal team and through December 2020 and January 2021 charged the Trump campaign $22,000 in legal fees if she thought that she was doing something so untoward? So look, I don't blame people who take plea deals because I've seen from start to finish what this DOJ or any of these prosecutors and judges are capable of doing. I don't bemoan anyone from doing that, especially January 6ers. Jenna Ellis is in a different position. She raised a lot of money. And now she is contradicting not just a financial record, but her social media record and other statements that she made, also believing that the 2020 election was stolen and illegitimate and that Trump should stay in power. So,
Okay.
Let's not waste any more time on her.
Okay, done. And now what else? What else are you working on? So we've gone across the globe from. I think we started in New York. Have you been following New York as well?
No, not as much, but I do think it's a good illustration for Americans to see what is going on. This judge looks like a Tim Burton movie character. Letitia James is like, she looks like, the Eddie Murray character when he pretends he's Stevie Wonder, like he can't, they're like her, she's just all over the place. It's just a farce, theater of the absurd.
What I love is like I did the connecting the Soros dots, and not to be conspiratorial. It's like Soros funded Fannie Willis. No, Fannie Willis is Georgia. So George Soros had a hand there. There was another one where I was surprised. He had a hand as well, from what I understand, in supporting the campaign of Letitia James. He had a hand in getting the governor of Colorado elected, who's the one who appointed the Judge Wallace in the Colorado case. I mean, it's crazy to think that money affects American politics and American legal system the way it does, but you can't deny it at a given point in time. Have you been following the Colorado case?
I did follow that a little bit, and to the extent that what I call one of the J6 celebrity cops, Daniel Hodges, a Metropolitan Police officer, testified in those proceedings as well. Still how traumatized he is and blaming Donald Trump for what happened. So, it's impossible to cover all of it. So I'm not going to pretend that I have.
No, well, don't worry. But there was an issue. There was an issue as to one of those Capitol police officers getting caught red-handed lying because there was a video showing that he wasn't as injured as he purported to be. Who was that? Was that Hodge?
No, Hodges is a DC police officer. That is Harry Dunn. He is a Capitol police officer, and Steve Baker, who is at Epoch Times now at the Blaze, did extensive investigative work looking at security camera footage and saw that this FBI agent, David Lazarus, who's also on, I believe, Nancy Pelosi's detail, and Harry Dunn, who we know has lied over and over about what happened on January 6th, saying that people called him the N-word, that he was threatened, that the Oath Keepers tried to take his life when they actually tried to help him. So yes, Steve Baker did uncover that lie. But what's frustrating is what's going to happen with it. All of those police officers lied under oath. Harry Dunn lied. Michael Fanone lied. Aquilina Gonell lied. Daniel Hodges just called people terrorists, whatever. But these are the celebrity cops, and now they are fully involved in trying to keep Donald Trump off the ballot. They're just more, as I call them, crisis actors.
All right, excellent. And hold on, if I forgot, I'm just trying to look at my notes to make sure I didn't forget anything. Julie, if I forgot to ask you anything that you absolutely wanted to mention, what else are you working on?
I'm working on a lot of different things. One will be the jury selection process in DC that will be up soon. Also covering the appellate judges, who are all these two Democrat-appointed appellate judges who, for some reason, keep getting every single January 6th and Trump-related case, even though they're supposed to be randomly assigned to a panel to hear them. So all my work can be found at Declassified at Julie Kelly on Substack. Also Real Clear Investigations. And as you know, I'm on Twitter, X a lot, Julie_Kelly too.
All right, I'm going to make sure that all of your links are in the pinned comment so people can find it. And by the way, it's not that anyone needs to tell you you're doing amazing work. You're doing amazing work because it's impossible for everybody to follow all of these things. So you got to pick your trusted sources and siphon up the information from them, because I follow you. I saw that affidavit for Yetman last week, and I'm like, oh, sorry, actually, last question. Yetman, that was the warrant for his arrest, and you noted that there was no supporting affidavit. As far as you understand, I have no understanding of this. Is that not standard operating procedure? And is it an indication of something?
They finally did post his affidavit the other night, and that is what he's been charged with: assault and a few other misdemeanors, civil disorder. But typically when they do make an announcement, they have the supporting documents. I'm sure they were sort of embarrassed what they came up with, but again, they have no shame, so maybe they weren't.
I mean, that's what I was going to say. And the indictment, the warrant itself was dated like the current date. Right. So they knew all of this for 2.5 years and then waited for now for reasons which I think you've elucidated and make total good sense. Julie, will you come back on periodically? I don't want to kick you out. I know you have something to go to now, so.
Yes, I've got, well, that's all right. I'm a few minutes late, but it's well worth it. And I love being on anytime.
Okay, please come back whenever you can, because I love picking your brain. And thank you very much.
Love being on. Thanks.
All right. Have a good one.
Thanks. You too.
Bye-bye.